Barbara Simons, acting president of Verified Voting, a great resource and treasure to the election integrity movement. You're going to want to make sure you take a look here at election security 2017, 2018, and 2020. So here we have Barbara Simons.
Are we ready to go? Okay. There's a key word in this first slide, acting. I'm very happy to say that in a little over a week, we're going to have a new president. Unfortunately, I can't tell you yet who it is. So stay tuned. It'll be a big announcement. I think everybody will be very happy. I know I will be. I'm going to be back as board chair. So let's see. Come on. Okay, next slide. Why 2017, 18, and 20? So here are a couple of quotes. I don't know if you can read them. This quote by James Comey is one of my favorite. Well, I think it's illustrative anyway. They'll be back in 2020, they may be back in 2018, and one of the lessons they may draw from this is that they were successful because they introduced chaos and division and discord and sowed doubt about the nature of the amazing country of ours and our democratic process. So that was in congressional testimony. And then Senator Mark Warner, both political parties, you may notice, said in a press conference a couple of days ago, we need a whole of government approach to voting security, and I think everybody in this audience would agree with that. If states don't proactively move forward, very shortly we'll be getting into primary season 2018, clearly a big concern of Senator Warner's. The reason for 2017 is that there are two major gubernatorial races coming up in November. New Jersey, which is all paperless D-ball DREs, some of the worst. And Virginia, which is a very exciting win that I'm going to be talking about. So next slide. What do you mean by secure democracy? And of course, David Jefferson, I think, already made these points in the last talk. What we want, and by we, I'm talking about verified voting, and again, I think everybody in this room, we want voter-marked paper ballots throughout the country, everywhere. We want mandatory manual post-election. Maybe not everybody believes risk-limiting audits, but that's what we are pushing for. No internet voting, period, end of story. And we have to significantly strengthen the cybersecurity of voter registration databases, which I'm referring to as VRDs in this slide because they take less space. And David already mentioned some of the concerns, I'm going to talk a bit more about them. And in order to achieve what we need to achieve, and we need to achieve this by 2020, paper ballots everywhere and audits. And so, I mean, this is a major, major undertaking. And we need to achieve some of this by 2018, which is coming up very soon. So this is a huge, huge undertaking. I don't know if we'll get there, but I think we have to try. We have to try. So we have to focus at both the federal and the state levels in these tasks. So I just have one slide about the federal level. I'm going to focus mainly on states in this talk. There are bipartisan efforts at the national level. There's coalition work, verified voting is involved, to insert language to require paper ballots and audits in must-pass legislation. Even if this succeeds, it almost certainly will be voluntary, and therefore the work at the state level remains critical. I mean, basically what they do would be to put funding in for this, but the funding would be optional, right? So just as you saw with the health care, with Obamacare, states could refuse money if they didn't want to follow the policies. So I'm going to talk briefly about voter registration databases. Oh, sorry, next. One more, next one. Great. I know why you forgot to tell them, David. It's confusing. So the voter registration databases are a major vulnerability, a really major vulnerability, and I have to confess, I mean, I'm not a database expert. Maybe there's somebody who's really good at doing secure databases, but I don't know any way to completely make these secure. I just don't. But there are things that we have to do. First of all, we have to worry about the fact that an attacker could selectively disenfranchise voters by deleting names or changing addresses. If done on a moderately large scale, result in chaos in the polls. Do I have the same slides? Okay, because I actually made some changes, but I guess I didn't save them. Oh well. The point is that, well, let me see if it's the next one. No, okay. All right, that's what I want. Sorry about this. So, a lot of these voter registration databases, not all of them, contain voters' party affiliations. So if you want to selectively disenfranchise voters, it would be very easy if you have access to the databases. And not only could it result in chaos in the polls, but it could change the outcome of an election. And voters would be given provisional ballots, but how do you verify the legitimacy of a voter if the voter registration database you're looking at has been hacked and you don't know which one was the last one that wasn't hacked? And if you think about it, we often don't find the things that have been hacked for 3 or 6 months after the fact. How do we know which is the version? If you save lots and lots of backups, which you should do, which must be done, you save lots and lots of backups. How do we know which one of those backups was the last one before the hack? And if we do know that, how do we make the updates that need to be made for all the people who've registered after that? So this is actually a very challenging problem. So again, there has to be lots of backups made. They should not be overwritten. And there needs to be significant improvements in cybersecurity at the local election level, which is going to be a major challenge given that most election officials are underfunded, under-resourced, and have little to no access to any kind of security, let alone the level that they need to protect these databases. So, next one. Russian hacking. I know there's been some objection to talking about Russian hacking, but I'm going to talk about Russian hacking. A year ago today was the anniversary of the Johnson-Clapper statement, which was the first time that we heard that Russia had been interfering with our elections. It was also, if you watched Rachel Maddow on Friday, was when Hurricane Matthew was about to hit. And at 3 o'clock, this Johnson-Clapper statement was made. At 4:02, I believe, the Access Hollywood tapes were released. And about an hour or so after that, the Poindexter emails were all leaked, all released. They weren't leaked, they were released. So, so we know, well, I mean, this is the fact that the government felt that Russia was messing with our elections really got hidden in the news. So we only recently found out from the Department of Homeland Security which 21 states they said had been successfully probed or attacked. And these have been the databases. So we know Arizona and Illinois voter registration databases have been penetrated. David mentioned that in his talk. You can see the 19 other states that they acknowledged had been probed. Now with probing, you don't know for sure how far that probing went. And of course, if I'm going to attack a database or a system, I'm going to probe it first, and see where the weaknesses are. Maybe they're planning to do something later. I don't know. What about the other 29 states? There's been little mention of the other 29 states. How do we know they weren't probed or attacked? And I mentioned Georgia. Maryland, I'm sure, would agree that in Georgia, the Secretary of State didn't want to know what's going on. And in fact, he accused the Department of Homeland Security of attempting to hack their own voter registration databases. So we know, as David said again, that VR systems, which makes poll books and voter registration databases, was successfully hacked. These systems were used in North Carolina, Virginia, New York, Illinois, Indiana, and California, and in Durham, North Carolina, where there were major failures on election day. That happens to be a heavily Democratic and minority area. There were long lines. Many people didn't get to vote because they couldn't afford to wait in line. The systems were never actually corrected. There were problems in other counties in North Carolina that were reported about people being sent to the wrong location, not being listed in the voter registration database, wrongly having been reported as having voted, and so on. So there were lots of issues with this particular database produced by VR systems that we know was hacked. Did that hack impact what happened in North Carolina? We don't know, because nobody has looked. There was an effort that several of us were involved with to try to bring this to court in Durham. And I should just mention, it's always very challenging legally to try to impound, you're keeping up with me, great, to try to impound any kind of voting system of any sort or database. I mean, it's a major headache. I mean, Marilyn didn't talk about this in her talk, but I'm sure that she's encountered this kind of issue too. It's very hard to get your hands on any of this technology. Even if the database had been impounded, the technology had been impounded, it would be very challenging to determine whether or not it was hacked. And even if the hack, and in fact, in the case of Durham, North Carolina, and North Carolina in general, even if we could prove that it had been hacked, even if we could prove that the results in North Carolina were wrong, it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the presidential election. And as I've said earlier, voters could be disenfranchised by name or address change, and the voting rolls could be padded by putting in fake names and then doing remote voting, so people don't have to show up at the polls. Legal action was opposed by the Democratic Party in North Carolina. And the reason was that North Carolina has this insane law that says if the vote count, I think this is for state offices, is within 10,000 votes, then the decision can go to the state legislature. And at one point, the count for governor, the Democratic candidate was ahead, but he was not ahead by 10,000 votes. He was ahead by fewer votes. And the Democrats were afraid that if this court case were brought, that would lead to this moving to the legislature. So, I mean, they were just very, very worried about this race. And as it happened, he ended up with more than 10,000 votes, so it didn't go to the legislature, which, by the way, is dominated by Republicans. But they basically told us to go away. So I'm going to talk a little bit about voting technologies. And next slide. Paperless DRE states. Now, you know, I had a hard time working on this talk because my assumption was that everybody here is an expert. I realize that's probably not true, so for those of you who aren't so familiar with this technology, please forgive me or ask questions at the end. DRE stands for Direct Recording Electronic. That means that you directly record your vote in the machine. That's where that comes from. And these are the worst kinds of voting machines, the paperless ones especially, because there's no record of the vote. It's impossible to do a recount. It's impossible to do an audit. These machines should have been recycled for scrap years ago. In fact, they never should have been brought to market in the first place. There are still, and I think this is a national scandal, there still are 5 entirely paperless states in this country: Delaware, Georgia, Louisiana, New Jersey, and South Carolina. And there are 8 partially paperless states: Arkansas, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, I think that's Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. In none of these states can you do a recount. Notice that Pennsylvania is one of those states. Pennsylvania was one of the 3 states where the Stein campaign was attempting to do a recount. We all knew they couldn't do a recount there. I mean, they were trying to do the best they could. They were trying to at least do a recount where there were paper ballots in Pennsylvania, which is only about 20% of the voters in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is a pretty important state. So what's happening in Pennsylvania is, again, a national scandal. And even where there are paper ballots, most states do not conduct adequate post-election ballot audits. Next slide. There are 23 paper ballot states. And this includes all vote-by-mail states. I'm not enamored of that either, but at least they have paper ballots. But I'm pleased to say, and I had a long discussion with this with our staff person who does this work, about 3/4 of the voters in this country vote on paper ballots. Even though there are only 23 all-paper ballot states, in the other states there are many people who vote by mail, and that's paper ballots. So if you add all that up, it's about 3/4. But there's still 1/4 of the voters in this country do not have paper ballots. Now, they might be voting on DREs with VPATs. Now, for those of you who don't know what a VPAT is, it's a voter-verified paper audit trail. These machines were retrofitted with this really crappy technology. I mean, we came up with the idea, and the vendors just totally destroyed it. Basically, people don't look at it, they don't check it, it's hard to audit, it's hard to recount, there are all kinds of problems with it. So anyway, there's a list of the 23 states that are paper ballot states. Notice the asterisks. This shows some of the problems with maintaining the verifier. For those of you who know the verified voting website, it's really hard to describe what a state does because so many of these states do mostly this, but then a little bit of that. And how do you count them? And how do you record them? It's very challenging. And then they constantly change, and you know, they don't tell us. So it's a real challenge. So here's internet voting, and David's basically already talked about it, so I'm going to skip over this except just to point out what I think was implicit in David's talk, which is that we mean return of voted ballots over the internet when we talk about internet voting, as opposed to making blank ballots available on the internet. That's not internet voting. And there was also, we are constantly fighting, by we, I mean, well, verified voting has been very actively involved with trying to stop internet voting at the state level. You wouldn't believe how many states have brought, oh, I should speed up, okay. How many states have had proposals to have internet voting for the entire state, and you have to go in and you have to hire lobbyists and you have to make a big fuss and then you keep quiet about it afterwards. So in California, there was going to be a ballot proposal in 2016 which had us really terrified for internet voting. Next slide. Good news, Virginia. Virginia was going to move to all paper ballots by 2020. 5 minutes, okay? However, Virginia has a really wonderful Commissioner of Elections, Eduardo Cortez, and he decided to test the security of the 5 remaining paperless DREs in the state of New Jersey. There's the list. They had a cybersecurity team, which had been, I don't know if it was the same team, but they had done something similar in 2014 with the Wind vote, which was such a bad paperless DRE that they discovered the security vulnerabilities because people's iPhones were misbehaving when they went to vote. And the reason the iPhones were misbehaving was that the iPhones were trying to communicate with the voting machine because it had Wi-Fi. These machines have been used since the early 2000s until after the 2014 midterm. If they were never hacked, it's only because no one ever tried. So next slide. What's that doing there? Oh, shoot. Sorry. What's the next slide here? My computer's misbehaving, but hey. Never happens, never happens. Internet voting, Virginia. So we're going to get to the bad news now. Bad news, Georgia. All paperless DREs, we've known how to rig them since 2006. They are probably the most studied voting system in the country, and every single study has shown them to be vulnerable. There was just this big race that Marilyn referred to, CD6, where $50 million was spent. There was an initial race, and then there was the runoff, and the runoff could have easily been manually counted. We knew that there were major vulnerabilities. We knew that Kennesaw State University, which was overseeing all of the elections in Georgia, was incredibly vulnerable. They had a huge hole, which, as Marilyn said, was there probably for at least 3 years. Nonetheless, they were voted on these machines. Next slide. I will skip this Georgia slide. Okay. Even worse news, Texas. Lubbock County just purchased over $6 million worth of paperless DREs in Texas. And it appears that there's a Texas law that mandates the use of paperless DREs for vote centers. Hart Intercivic is suing the Texas Secretary of State over allegations that the Secretary of State exceeded his power by allowing the use of paper systems, of voting systems that produce voter-verified paper records. ES&S has spoken out against it, so here we are. We need to organize amicus briefs. Now, I'm mentioning this for 2 reasons. First of all, Texas is an important state. Second of all, as we've just heard with these discussions of the recounts, you never know what you're going to turn up. I mean, it's like you think paper ballots will be, Michigan and Wisconsin, hey, they've got paper ballots. These are good states, right? They're model states, and look at what we just heard. Look at what we just heard. I mean, it's very disturbing. I mean, the only good news is that we're not going to run out of things to do for a while. And there's the Texas law. I won't bother reading it anyway. Disappointing news, California, and we're undoubtedly going to hear more about AB 840. Thank you for going to the right slide. California's had a law since 1965 mandating 1% of precincts randomly selected for recount after an election. At the time, it was a very innovative law. But of course, we now know we know much better ways of doing it. So what we really need to do is to move to risk-limiting audits in California. But instead, AB 840 has been introduced, which would reduce the ballots in the audits to those tabulated on election night. It would exclude many vote-by-mail and provisional ballots, and provide obvious targets for anyone who wants to attack the election in California. Even though the 1% manual recount is far from perfect, it provides some protection. This would basically strip a lot of the ballots in California from even that protection. And it's being pushed by some election officials in response to a legal ruling in California that all vote-by-mail ballots must be included when you figure out the recounts, instead of trying to find more time to do this work, because I understand election officials are stressed for time. This is a difficult thing to do. Instead of extending the time period, they're trying to reduce the effectiveness of the audit. So basically, again, the moral of the story is you can't take anything for granted. I mean, I had no idea Michigan and Wisconsin were so bad. The Michigan thing, the recount was just a real eye-opener. I mean, you just couldn't believe that this could be happening in a state like that. So I think I've ended up under time. I have a lot of questions for you guys. I hope some people will join in. Which states should we be focusing on? It looks like almost every state. I hate to say it. But how do we prioritize? Because we have this critical goals. 2018. 2020, we've got to get our act together in this country. And we can no longer afford to make modest improvements. I mean, this is a national security issue, as David has been saying. This is, I think our democracy is on the line, and we've got to fix this. So how do we go about it? Which states? What needs to be done? How do we get the people? How do we get the resources? And again, as everybody else has been saying, money is a big factor. We need to get the money to hire the people to do the work that needs to get done. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Questions? Can you go ahead?
Oh, sorry. I wish if I were taller, it wouldn't have been such a problem, but.
There's a light on now? Yeah, there we go. So I want to express an opinion on what states to focus on, but when you went through the different stories of what happened in different states, you went through kind of fast.
Sorry, they were yelling at me behind.
I have 2 questions about both of the states that have governor elections this year. You said there was good news in Virginia, and that they're definitely going to do all paper now. Is that what you said? That's
yes.
Great. And you had a slide in there about New Jersey that you skipped.
Oh, sorry, I skipped New Jersey. Sorry. Okay, can I say something about New Jersey? New Jersey.
For you too.
New Jersey's all paperless. Let me see if I can bring that up. New Jersey's all paperless paperless DREs. There are 4 different kinds. 2 of them are of the same type that were decertified in Virginia. Now, what happened in Virginia was that Cortez, on September 8th, because I remember because my granddaughter was getting married the next day, on September 8th, he recommended to the Board of Elections that all the DREs in Virginia be decertified. And initially, the Republican, who had been actually rather opposed to DREs, was going to vote no because it was so close to this upcoming gubernatorial race. They went into private session, and I don't know what they were told, but they came out and they unanimously voted to decertify all of them. This was unanimous, bipartisan decision in Virginia. Decertify all the paperless DREs, every single one. Even though they were under incredible time pressure, they were able to pull this off in part because because Cortez contacted the vendors to make sure they had enough machines to replace these, and they would do it without charging the counties money. This year they could defer payment because they didn't have anything in their budget to pay for it. So this is what happened in Virginia. We're trying to go to New Jersey and say, hey, look, Virginia, you've got some of the same damn machines that they had, and they decertify them. Why don't you get rid of yours? But of course, it's probably not going to happen now because we're too close to the gubernatorial race. And so a major gubernatorial race in 2017 will be held in New Jersey, and there will be no way whatsoever to check it. Thank you for asking that question.
Barbara, my name is Dale Axelrod. I'm a member of the Sonoma County Democratic Central Committee. In answer to your question about what states to prioritize, we just passed a resolution at the state level. The California Democratic Party has got a resolution going to the Democratic National Committee to urge them to be more proactive in protecting voter rights and fighting voter suppression. My answer to you is, why wouldn't, and I hope this comes out of the this conference this weekend, why isn't there a national network that can go in all 50 states? Why do we have to go into a state when there's obviously people woken up in every state across the union about how the election systems need to be fixed and dealt with? And verified voting may be the organization that could coordinate a national network like that.
We'd like to be able to pull that off if we can. One of the problems is finding the right people in the states. I mean, we have to be careful to get people who understand the issues and who aren't going to be, gaming the system or dismissed as being kooks. I mean, we've all, I think, had that experience one time or another. But there are some people who actually are kooks. So, you have... The present company excluded, obviously. But you have to be careful who you ally yourself with, right? I mean, it's not trivial. Just because someone says, I care about this issue, how do you know that they really do? How do you know they're going to work with you? How do you know they're not going to subvert you? So fortunately, there are a lot of allies that we have here in this room and elsewhere at the various states who we know we can really count on and work together. But it's just going to be a very challenging problem, which isn't to say we shouldn't tackle it. We have to tackle it. I don't know if that's adequate, but...
Well, speaking about a kook, some people call me that too, but I'm really a conspiracy factualist. I deal in facts. And in fact, nobody's called me a kook in many years. But anyway, first off, I just want to say verified voting, thank you. I'm on your database every day, and this is a little commercial. If you want to know about your state, you Google and you get to verified voting. It will tell you about all your voting equipment. It will give you links to how they work, reports. And, and my question to you is, I just finished a 50-state study because I was very interested in the new technology that's coming out for optical scanners, which are digital. How often do you update the site, and when do you think the next big update? I know last year it was sometime in August I saw the big changes, but I guess you don't do it every year because it is expensive to do. When does you think your next update will be ready and up?
Well, we do. We update various parts of it constantly. The problem is that verified voting has fought way ahead of its what's the weight level. We are very small. We have a very small staff. Basically Warren Stewart does this work, and he's one person. And he does the best he can. He knows if you have any questions about the machines used in different states, different counties, he's on top of it. But again, it's a matter of time and resources, which is why we need more resources. Also, there's a whole other issue of how do you present the information. Every time I talk to Warren, I learn about things that aren't on our website. Because the question is, where do you put it? How do you put it there? These are probably all solvable problems, but they're hard. Changes, but I will say California is not as bad as Maryland, and I don't know if Washington State fixed that or not. They haven't. So Maryland and Washington State have similar ID requirements, but one of the ID requirements is the driver's license. But in those states, you can compute the driver's license number if you know the name and the age, birth date. Yeah, so age, right? Name and birth date. Put it into an algorithm, you get the driver's license number. So basically, the requirements for authentication in Washington State and Maryland are all public. It's all publicly available. And this is a perfect way to disenfranchise voters because in, say, Washington State, the Democrats tend to be in Seattle, the Republicans tend to be in the suburbs and exurbs. Whichever party you want to lose, you disenfranchise.
Hi. Not so much a question, but really a comment back on Russia, Russia, Russia. So according to the VIPS group, which is the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, it's a much bigger group than three. Ray McGovern, a former CIA analyst, high level, serving under 4 presidents, and a former NSA director, at least to the DNC email, say it wasn't hacked due to download speed. It was not possible. It was an inside leak. And then they also said that there's software or malware or something that can leave a footprint, that it was another country, but not necessarily Russia.
Well, I mean, who do you choose to believe? I mean, it's a question of who do you choose to believe in a lot of these things. I actually tend to believe Clapper and people like that. You believe other people. But
No,
as far as...
I'm just saying that they brought up the fact that download speed matters. Right? So if you're copying information, it's not possible if it's being hacked internationally. And I'm just saying that it's worth keeping an open mind. I haven't seen any evidence. All the
I really don't want to get into discussion of this because it's not what I was talking about. But let me just say, in support of what you're saying.
But it is, because you were saying Russia, Russia, Russia. But
in support of what you're saying, I don't think we should say Russia, Russia, Russia.
Yeah.
We need to say Russia, North Korea, Iran, Iraq, ISIS, the mafia, whoever. Because all of these institutions are capable of hacking our elections. And the reason we shouldn't say just Russia, 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 I'm just talking about the news, is that we need to get bipartisan support. If we say Russia, 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 that turns off a lot of Republicans who think we're attacking Donald Trump's presidency. And we need Republican support to affect the changes that we need.
I think we're at time.
Since the focus on Russia is coming under such discussion here, I just want to point out that the election interference part of the Russia investigation may turn out to be the most minor part of it. That it's the economic corruption and the conflict of interest and the emoluments clause part that is going to have legs. So I just want to...
It's not online, but I have a PDF of it.
Oh, cool.